The Waiting Room, A Journey of Faith. Daniel and Esther were full of joy on their wedding day. Their eyes sparkled with love, and everyone said they were a perfect match. They danced, laughed, and praised God for bringing them together. Children will come soon, everyone said. Esther smiled shyly. She believed it too. The first few months of marriage were filled with excitement. Esther marked her calendar and bought baby clothes even before any signs. Daniel would place his hand on her stomach every night and whisper, "God will do it." They believed the baby would come quickly. 1 year passed, no baby. Friends who married after them were already having children. Esther smiled at the baby showers, but her heart ached. At night she cried quietly. Daniel held her and said, "God's time is the best." But he too sometimes wept when no one was watching. Every Sunday they sat in the same church pew. The pastor often preached about Hannah. People whispered, "They are still waiting." Sometimes someone would say, "Maybe they should pray harder," not knowing how many nights they had cried out to God already. They finally went to the hospital. The doctor said there was nothing wrong. That should have been good news, but it brought more confusion. "Then why?" Esther asked, sobbing into Daniel's chest. He had no answer. They both felt lost, but they held on to each other. Esther started calling their season the waiting room. It was a place where prayers were said with tears, where time seemed slow, and where hope was tested. But in this room, they also grew stronger. They fasted, prayed, and even sang through their pain. Relatives began to ask questions. Friends became distant. Some even said, "Adopt or try something else." Daniel and Esther smiled politely but chose to wait on God. It wasn't easy. There were days of silence between them, days filled with doubt, but they never let go of each other or of God. One night, Esther got up and began to worship at midnight. Daniel joined her. They worshiped with tears streaming down their faces. "Even if you never give us a child, we will still praise you," Esther whispered. That night, peace entered their hearts like never before. Daniel had a dream. He saw a little girl running to him, calling him Daddy. He told Esther, and they held hands and prayed. It didn't mean the wait was over, but it reminded them that God had not forgotten. 5 years had passed. It was their wedding anniversary. They went out to a small restaurant. Esther smiled more freely now. She had learned to find joy even in waiting. "Even if God says no, he is still good," she said. Daniel nodded. "He always has a reason." At a prayer meeting, a guest pastor pointed at them and said, "Your wait is over." They didn't jump or shout. They had heard many words before, but deep down, a small fire of hope started to burn again. One morning, Esther felt weak and dizzy. She thought it was stress. But at the hospital, the doctor smiled and said, "You are 2 months pregnant." Esther broke down in tears. Daniel could hardly believe it. They knelt and worshipped right there in the hospital. The pregnancy was not easy. There were scares and threats of miscarriage. But every night, Daniel read psalms to her belly. They declared God's promises daily. Their home was filled with quiet worship and a deep, trusting peace. On a rainy Thursday morning, after hours of labor, Esther gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Eliora, which means "God is my light." Daniel wept as he held his daughter. The waiting was over, but the testimony had just begun. At church, they gave their testimony. There were no dramatic screams, just quiet, deep praise. "The waiting room was painful," Esther said, "but God was with us every day." Their story became a light to others who were still waiting.